Hello, this is Adam again, checking in from the ANCA headquarters here in Washington, and just wanted to share with you a little bit of what we've been up to today. It's been a busy day of consultations among the Armenian stakeholders to this conflict. Obviously, the representative of Nagorno Karabakh, the Embassy of Armenia, our sister Armenian organizations, and of course, we've been in touch with officials of the Department of State. Our Government Affairs Director Kate Nagorno met with very senior officials at the department earlier today. We'll be meeting with them again early tomorrow morning. We have communicated our concerns on a number of levels. First and foremost, we've explained that this violence beyond the human dimension, which is a very, very serious, but at a political level, this Azerbaijan's violence represents a challenge to American leadership and the stability of the entire region. I think this is essentially the language that U.S. policymakers, that U.S. policy planners understand. Azerbaijan is taking actions today that will threaten U.S. interests and certainly potentially could affect the energy resources, the delivery of energy resources from that part of the world. So I think that this conflict certainly has the attention of U.S. policymakers. We just need to make sure that the U.S. engagement, which we encourage, is a principled engagement. I want to share with you some of the key points that we've made today. I have them sharing my notes here. Obviously, first and foremost, we'd like to see forceful U.S. condemnation of Azerbaijan's aggression. We have not seen that to date. We've seen voices elsewhere throughout the world condemn Azerbaijan's violence and its unilateral action to escalate this conflict. For example, the Organization of American States made a very thoughtful, accurate, and balanced condemnation today of Azerbaijan's actions. Others around the world, including members of the U.S. Congress, have done so as well. Senator Kirk, Congressman Schiff, Congressman Sherman, Congressman Cicilline, Dold, Pallone, and others have spoken very eloquently about the danger that Azerbaijan's actions represent to U.S. interests, American values, and the peace of the region. So number one on the list is getting America to break with this destructive pattern of false parity, this idea of artificial even-handedness that responds to every act of Azerbaijani aggression with a generic call upon all sides to restrain themselves. The end result of that is that Azerbaijan gets a free pass, and that there is no disengagement. This was illustrated in the most stunning form when the president of Azerbaijan, as I've mentioned to you before, visited Washington, D.C., and left this city without any rebuke, without even a public reservation voiced by either Senator Secretary Kerry or Vice President Biden. They both met with him, both stood with him publicly, and spoke in glowing terms of the Azerbaijan partnership, without a single word of criticism about Azerbaijan's aggression abroad or its repression at home. A very destructive signal. He certainly left Washington emboldened. If he feared at all coming to Washington where he might be chastened or criticized, well, he left safe in the knowledge that he could act with impunity, and in fact, he did so literally within hours of leaving our nation's capital. So first and foremost on the agenda is forceful U.S. condemnation. It's late, but it's not too late, and we need your help to push that. And a great way you can do it is by asking your members of Congress to weigh in. The more members of Congress weigh in, the more the administration will pay attention. We've had some good response, but we need more, and they're going to answer to you. They're going to answer to you, their voters, and their constituents. So you need to visit www.anca.org/StopAlia. Now, we get the records. We know that thousands upon thousands of Armenians across the country have taken action. That's a great thing. I'm very encouraged by it. But I also know that for every Armenian who's taken action, there are 5 or 10 who have not. And if you're one of those, then please take action today. And if you're one of those who have taken action, please encourage your friends and family, colleagues, associates, and others to do so as well. We need vast numbers. We need to show strength in every congressional district, in every state across our nation. So first and foremost, we got to get America on record condemning Azerbaijan's aggression. That is the only way we're going to deter that nation. If they get a free pass, this will just happen again and again. More lives will be lost, not just Armenian lives, but Azeri lives, because everyone who dies in this conflict is ultimately a victim of Ilham Aliyev, and we should not, as Americans, be guilty of enabling that or emboldening that. We should not enable violence. This is a crucial task, number one. Number two, let's be clear that Azerbaijan, through this latest action, the most dramatic escalation of aggression since the 1994 ceasefire, has changed the terms of this issue. That what was once framed, at least in our advocacy, as an effort to secure peace, right, has now changed. And let me dig into that a little bit for all of you. For the last several months, in fact, since last October, we've made a very serious push at all levels of the federal government for the Royce-Engel peace initiatives. They're very concrete proposals to stop the fighting and to create the conditions for lasting peace. They are, very specifically, the withdrawal of snipers and heavy arms, meaning the introduction of no new technology or no new weaponry. Number two, the addition of OSCE observers, more eyes on the ground to see what's happening. And third, a technology solution, very advanced but also relatively inexpensive, to deploy gunfire locator systems. And our community invested tremendous time and effort in building congressional support for this initiative. We're blessed that members of Congress that have led this effort have showed vision and compassion and a real desire for peace. Chairman Ed Royce, Ranking Member Eliot Engel, Senior Member of the Foreign Affairs Committee Brad Sherman, and others have done heroic work. And I'm proud, I think we can all be proud, that the most concrete proposal for peace for Karabakh was born right here in Washington by our elected representatives. So we're very proud of that. We invested a lot of time and effort in that, and we should continue to push for peace. But the terms have changed. Azerbaijan has shown that the effort to promote peace has its limits, and that limit is Ilham Aliyev. And I think we need to respond in kind by saying our ask can no longer simply be that we deploy locators or that we add observers or pull back snipers. Now we need to look to the root cause of this conflict. And what is it that will really, really lead to peace in the long term? And that is, and we need to put America on record, and I think America should be on record, supporting the very, very American idea that all nations, all people have a right to govern themselves, to live under a government of their own choosing through democratic and free elections. The citizens of Karabakh have done so for a quarter century. They have established every element of independent statehood that might be required of them, more than many other countries in the world that are recognized and have seats at the UN. It's time for the U.S. to extend full and formal recognition to the independent Republic of Nagorno Karabakh. That, given Azerbaijan's conduct, truly represents the best path to peace. So I think we're going to need to turn the page on that and recognize that Azerbaijan has forfeited every opportunity, every olive branch, every hand extended in peace, every opportunity to demand accountability, every opportunity to avoid death and destruction by the withdrawal of forces, where for the withdrawal of new weaponry and heavy weaponry and snipers from the line of contact. They can only visit death and suffering upon civilians and soldiers alike. We've fought that very hard, and we remain committed to peace. But maybe the path to peace, in fact, certainly the path to peace today, is a U.S. recognition of Artsakh's independence. There's much more that we need to do, and I'll run through some of these issues as well. They're all important, and I think together they can make a real difference. The first is, you may not know that every year U.S. taxpayers send our hard-earned dollars to the Azerbaijani military. There's a U.S. military aid program to Baku that sends millions of dollars a year to the Azerbaijani military. I think it is manifestly evident that Azerbaijan neither needs nor deserves American military aid. Every dollar that is extended to that military is a dollar that's freed up to launch attacks, to kill Armenians, to rally and arm an army that is dedicated to one purpose, which is the destruction of Artsakh and ultimately, I think, the destruction of Armenia. Why are we sending military to this oil-rich, corrupt dictator so that he in turn can use it to kill innocent civilians? So we need also to first call upon the president to suspend the program unilaterally, but failing that, and parallel to that, an effort to ask Congress, the appropriators, the members of the House and Senate Foreign Operations Subcommittees, to zero out military aid to Azerbaijan. There's no reason why American taxpayers should be asked to pay for this. Now, Aliyev may continue his attacks, and he's certainly got the resources to do so, but he should not be able to do so at our expense, at the expense of American citizens. It is a disgrace. That aid program has got to end. Another thing that has to end is intelligence sharing. Now, I'm not privy to the types of intelligence that the United States government shares with Azerbaijan, but I can tell you this: if there's any that's being shared, it's being put to use by the Azeri government for aggressive purposes. And they've demonstrated that any weapon, any information, any asset that's put in their hands, they turn into a weapon against the Armenian nation, against the Armenian people, against Artsakh and Hayastan. So we need to end all intelligence sharing with Azerbaijan, and turning back to a law that was put in place in the early 90s, Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act, which prohibited direct U.S. aid to the government of Azerbaijan until they ended their blockade and ceased hostilities against Armenia and Artsakh. That law was passed in 1992, I believe, but it was the Congress gave, after 9/11, the president the authority to waive that, and that was now in 2001, many years ago. Looking at that, we've President Bush and President Clinton, President Bush rather, and President Obama have exercised that congressional waiver every year, saying, well, we don't think this aid represents a threat to the Armenians or the people of Artsakh. We think it serves some useful purpose, so we waive this law. We exercise the right that Congress has given us to waive this law to provide direct aid to Azerbaijan. We think that if there ever was a question as to whether Azerbaijan merited that waiver, there can be no question today. This was a unilateral attack, an escalation that cost dozens and dozens of lives on both sides. A 12-year-old Armenian boy was killed in a brutal act. There have been reports of execution and mutilation of very elderly Armenians in the Talish region as well. How we can justify keeping Section 907 waived or allowing the waiver of 907, there's no justification for that. The president should cease his waivers, and failing that, we need to work with Congress to try and tighten that language up so that the president can't subsidize an Azerbaijan that is hell-bent on the destruction of the Armenian people. Taking that a step further, we look at what Congressman Chris Smith has introduced. Congressman Chris Smith has introduced a sanctions bill that says that we should impose sanctions on senior Azerbaijani leaders due to their repression of domestic dissent. That's a very, very excellent piece of legislation. We support it wholeheartedly. It would impose economic sanctions, travel sanctions on top Azeri leaders, and also limits on international lending and loans to Azerbaijan, which is something that's particularly important in light of the devaluation of the manat and the drop in oil prices. Azerbaijan is in a far more tenuous situation economically than it was even a year or two ago, and they are now in the market for international loans. This bill, if passed, would certainly direct the U.S. members of these international institutions from opposing those loans, which is very meaningful because the U.S. has a very strong stake in these international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. We look at that legislation and think it's an excellent approach to promoting democracy. We, of course, would like that approach extended to not just cover domestic repression, but regional aggression. And I think that those same sanctions should apply to the president of Azerbaijan, the defense minister of Azerbaijan, and others who've been engaged in these atrocities. We understand that the defense minister of Azerbaijan was in the field, that commanding operations, and we look at the reports of executions and mutilations and the murder of children and the bombing of Mardakert and other civilian centers as their responsibility. They need to bear responsibility. They should never, ever be welcomed into the United States. They have no place here except to be arrested. A couple other things to touch on is going back to the Royce-Engel proposals to review. The members of Congress from both parties have wholeheartedly endorsed the Royce-Engel proposals. We have seen Ambassador Warlick and others in the State Department endorse it as well, in writing, in public. They've added their name to this effort. We have seen Armenia and Artsakh endorse these proposals. It's Azerbaijan that has not. It's Azerbaijan that has obstructed their implementation. And the U.S. response has been tepid, right? Just because Azerbaijan opposes these proposals doesn't mean that's where they die. It seems that we've just taken their no as a no, we've extended a veto to them and let this process die at Ilham Aliyev's doorstep. That's simply unacceptable. We need to either A, force Azerbaijan to accept these proposals because they are nothing but peace proposals. They demand, for example, accountability about who shot first. Only the party that shoots first would be against the mechanism to discover that. So we can't take their no as a no. Their no, in fact, is an admission of guilt. But failing Azerbaijan's cooperation, the U.S. government should work with Armenia and Artsakh on a unilateral deployment of these sensors on the Armenian side of the Artsakh Azerbaijan border or the Armenian side of the Armenian Azeri border. This equipment can be deployed at a safe distance, but still with significant accuracy. And we think that there's a lot of room for American leadership, and we've really, I think, as a government here, the U.S. government has dropped the ball on a very promising proposal for peace. On the humanitarian front, there's much that can be done, and America has a proud tradition of a humanitarian spirit, a generous heart, and we need to extend that today to the people of Artsakh in two concrete ways. Number one, we're calling for an emergency implementation of relief assistance. The United States should airlift medicine, tents, food, other relief supplies to the people who've been affected by Azerbaijan's aggression within Artsakh. So there should be an airlift, an emergency delivery of humanitarian aid. And then number two, our government, the U.S. government, led by our State Department, should immediately send a fact-finding mission to the region to look at what's happening on the ground, to study the effect, the damage inflicted by Azerbaijan's aggression, and then to conduct a needs assessment about what it would take to provide relief to those who are in immediate need, and more longer term, how to rebuild and reconstruct all that was lost during this latest round of conflict. Hopefully, we'll see a pause on that for the time being, but we don't know. We don't know. Azerbaijan has shown that it is unpredictable and reserves for itself the right at any time. So now we're into essentially our third day of conflict. More deaths were reported today. I understand a bus, including children, was destroyed with 5 deaths. This is just going on and on and on with new weapons, with new firepower. Azerbaijan is seemingly hell-bent on the destruction of Artsakh and ultimately Armenia as well. We need to stand up. I can tell you this, that the ANCA here in Washington, in our regional and local offices and chapters and around the country, our activists, our friends, our allies in Congress, all of us are working nonstop. But to be effective, for our voice to have an impact, you need to raise your voice. You need to weigh in with your members of Congress. Take action today, as I said, at www.anca.org/stopaliyev. Visit our website, anca.org, www.anca.org. If you are on the ANCA email list, this evening you should be receiving an update, a written update that will go into more detail about the steps that you can take. If by the end of tonight you have not received an ANCA update, please write to us at anca@anca.org and ask to be added to our list. We have a list of several 100,000 Armenians, but that means that 700,000 Armenians more are not on our list, and we want to add. We want to complete that list. We want to have every single friend of Armenia and our American of Armenian heritage on our list. So if tonight you do receive an email from us, that means you're on our list, and that's great. Take action. You're part of the second army of the Armenian nation. But if you did not receive an email, please write to us. If you have ideas, send them to ideas@anca.org. There are today brave men and women on the frontiers of Armenian freedom. Some of them may very well die today, even as we speak. They bear the heavy brunt of this violence, and they bear the burden of Armenia's future and freedom. We are here in the diaspora a second army. We don't face the risks, but the stakes are just as high. We need to do all we can. Let us fight as hard as we can. Let us reach out as widely as we can, so that no other young Armenian is asked to give their life on the field of combat. Let us rally the international community to condemn and isolate Baku, to condemn and isolate Aliyev, to condemn and isolate Azerbaijan, so that they can no longer commit these acts with impunity. That is our task. It is a great task. It's one that we pursue very seriously in Washington, that we do in cities and communities across this country, and frankly through a high tide movement that is global and has efforts similar to this in Brussels and Beirut and Moscow and Canberra and Buenos Aires and Mexico City and everywhere around the globe. We're all working together. We have a mission, which is first and foremost to stop the violence. Number two, to work toward the recognition of Karabakh. And number three, to establish a fair and enduring peace for the Armenian people. This is my message today. I'm sure we'll have more news tomorrow after our discussions with the State Department. Look forward to hearing from you. As always, we benefit greatly from your input, your advice, your ideas. So comment here on my Facebook page. Take your comments over to the ANCA Facebook page if you like. That is even a broader reach. Communicate with us on Twitter, on Snapchat, on Reddit, whichever platform you like, LinkedIn, or any platform of your choosing, or send us an email at anca@anca.org. With that, I will share with you my humble thanks and my high hopes for a better tomorrow. Thank you.